What started as routine promotion turned into television chaos when Ben Affleck and Jimmy Kimmel's friendship imploded on live TV, sparking a confrontation so explosive it left audiences stunned and social media in uproar. The studio lights blazed, with their usual intensity as Jimmy Kimmel Live prepared for what seemed like another standard Wednesday night taping. Ben Affleck, dressed in a sharp navy suit, sat comfortably in the guest chair, his familiar smile masking the tension that would soon erupt. The audience, packed with eager fans, had no idea they were about to witness one of the most shocking moments in late-night television history. Kimmel opened with his typical monologue, cracking jokes about current events and Hollywood gossip. The crowd laughed on cue, completely unaware that their host had prepared something far more controversial for his longtime friend. As the commercial break ended and cameras rolled, Kimmel's demeanor shifted subtly. Gone was the playful banter that usually characterized his interviews with Affleck. Instead, there was an edge to his voice, a calculated coldness that seasoned viewers might have recognized as trouble brewing. "So, Ben, let's talk about your latest project," Kimmel began, leaning forward with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "But first, I think we need to address the elephant in the room. Your gambling addiction has been making headlines again, and honestly, some people are wondering if you're really the right person to be making movies about redemption and second chances." The studio fell silent. Affleck's smile faltered, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. This wasn't the light-hearted roasting they usually engaged in. This felt personal, calculated, and deliberately cruel. The actor shifted in his seat, clearly caught off guard by the aggressive opening. "Jimmy, I thought we were here to talk about the film," Affleck replied, his voice measured but with an underlying warning. "My personal struggles aren't really up for discussion, especially not in this format." But Kimmel wasn't backing down. If anything, he seemed energized by Affleck's discomfort. "Come on, Ben. You've been open about your addiction before. I'm just asking what everyone's thinking. How do we know you won't relapse again? How do we know you're not gambling away your kids' college funds right now?" The audience shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't the Jimmy Kimmel they knew, the affable host who gently ribbed his guests while maintaining an atmosphere of fun and respect. This was something darker, more predatory. Several audience members exchanged worried glances, sensing that what they were witnessing was crossing a line. Affleck's face flushed red, his hands gripping the armrests of his chair. "That's completely out of line, Jimmy. We've been friends for years. Why are you doing this?" "Friends tell each other the truth," Kimmel shot back, his voice dripping with false sincerity. "And the truth is, Hollywood has a problem with enabling people like you. Maybe it's time someone called you out on national television." The camera zoomed in on Affleck's face, capturing every micro-expression of hurt, anger, and betrayal. His breathing had become shallow, his knuckles white as he fought to maintain composure. The man who had battled addiction, divorce, and public scrutiny was being ambushed by someone he trusted, someone who knew exactly which buttons to push to cause maximum damage. "You want to talk about enabling?" Affleck's voice grew louder, his Boston accent becoming more pronounced as his anger mounted. "Let's talk about how you've built your entire career on tearing people down for cheap laughs. Let's talk about how you hide behind humor to avoid taking responsibility for the pain you cause." The audience was now visibly uncomfortable, some covering their faces, others pulling out their phones to record what was clearly becoming a historic television meltdown. The producers in the control room were frantically deciding whether to cut to commercial, but the train wreck was too compelling to stop. Kimmel leaned back, seemingly pleased with the reaction he'd provoked. "Oh, so now I'm the bad guy for asking legitimate questions? Ben, you're a public figure. You chose this life. If you can't handle the scrutiny, maybe you should have stayed behind the camera." "Scrutiny is one thing," Affleck spat, standing up from his chair. "Character assassination is another. You're supposed to be a professional, Jimmy. This isn't comedy. This is cruelty." The tension in the studio was palpable. Security guards positioned near the stage tensed, unsure whether they should intervene. The house band sat frozen, their instruments silent as they watched the confrontation unfold. Even the usually animated crowd had fallen into an eerie quiet, sensing they were witnessing something that would be talked about for years to come. "Sit down, Ben," Kimmel commanded, his mask of civility finally slipping completely. "We're not done here." Affleck's eyes flashed with a fury that made the entire studio hold its breath. "Don't you dare tell me what to do. You ambushed me, Jimmy. This was supposed to be about promoting a film, and instead, you're trying to destroy me on live television." The host's laugh was cold and calculated. "Destroy you? Ben, you've done a pretty good job of that yourself. I'm just asking the questions that need to be asked. How many times have you been to rehab now? 3? 4? At what point do we stop pretending you're going to change?" The cruelty in Kimmel's voice was unmistakable now. Gone was any pretense of friendship or professional courtesy. He was going for the kill, and everyone in the studio could feel it. Affleck's face had gone from red to pale, his hands shaking with barely contained rage. "You know what, Jimmy? You're right about one thing. I have struggled. I've made mistakes. But at least I've had the courage to face them, to get help, to try to be better. What's your excuse for being a heartless piece of garbage who gets off on humiliating people?" The audience gasped audibly. This wasn't just a heated exchange anymore. This was personal warfare being broadcast to millions of viewers. Social media was already exploding with clips and reactions. Hashtags trending in real time as the confrontation escalated beyond anything anyone had expected. Kimmel's eyes narrowed, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper that the microphone still picked up perfectly. "Careful, Ben. You're a guest on my show. I can make this a lot worse for you." "Worse?" Affleck let out a bitter laugh. "How could this possibly get worse? You've already violated every boundary of human decency. You've taken our friendship and used it as ammunition against me. You've brought up my children, my addiction, my private struggles, all for what? Ratings? Your own sick entertainment?" The camera operators were having trouble keeping up with the intensity, switching between wide shots that captured the full scope of the confrontation and close-ups that revealed every emotion playing across both men's faces. The control room was in chaos, with producers screaming conflicting instructions about whether to cut away or let it continue. "You want to know what's really sick?" Kimmel continued, seemingly oblivious to the damage he was causing. "It's watching Hollywood rally around people like you while real talent gets ignored. You've been coasting on mediocrity for years, trading on sympathy for your addictions instead of actually improving as an actor or a person." The words hit Affleck like physical blows. His breathing became labored, his face contorting with pain and rage. "You don't know anything about my work, my struggles, or my life. You sit behind this desk making jokes about people's pain, because it's easier than examining your own pathetic existence." "My existence?" Kimmel's voice rose to match Affleck's intensity. "I've built an empire, Ben. I've created something lasting. What have you done lately besides disappoint everyone who's ever believed in you?" The studio audience was now openly uncomfortable, many covering their faces or looking away from the brutal verbal assault. Some were crying, others were angrily shouting at Kimmel to stop. Security guards had moved closer to the stage, clearly preparing for the possibility that the confrontation might turn physical. Affleck stepped forward, invading Kimmel's space behind the desk. "You want to know what I've done? I've survived. I've fought battles you couldn't even imagine. I've faced my demons while you've made a career out of being everyone else's demon." "Get back," Kimmel warned, suddenly looking less confident as Affleck loomed over him. "You're making a fool of yourself on national television. The only fool here is me for thinking you were my friend," Affleck shot back. "For trusting you enough to come on this show and subject myself to this torture. You've shown everyone exactly who you really are tonight, Jimmy. A bully. a coward who hides behind his platform to destroy people. The tension reached a breaking point as both men stared at each other, the years of friendship crumbling in real time. The audience could sense that something irreversible was happening, that they were witnessing the end of not just an interview, but a relationship that had spanned decades. Kimmel made one final devastating move. "You know what, Ben? Maybe your ex-wife had the right idea leaving you. Maybe she saw what everyone else is finally seeing." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. The entire studio went dead silent, as if the oxygen had been sucked out of the room. Affleck's face went completely white, then flushed deep. Red as the magnitude of what Kimmel had just said sank in. This wasn't just crossing a line. This was obliterating every boundary of human decency. "You son of a bitch," Affleck whispered, his voice barely audible but filled with such venom that it carried to every corner of the studio. "You just brought my family into this, my children's mother. You crossed the one line that should never be crossed." The audience was in shock, many openly weeping at the cruelty they were witnessing. Others were shouting at Kimmel, their voices creating a cacophony of anger and disbelief. The house band members sat frozen, their faces reflecting the horror everyone felt at watching this public evisceration of a man's most private pain. Kimmel, perhaps realizing he had gone too far but too proud to back down, doubled down on his attack. "The truth hurts, doesn't it, Ben? Maybe if you'd spent less time at the poker tables and more time being a husband and father, things would have turned out differently." "Stop." Affleck's voice cracked with emotion. "Just stop. You have no right to judge my marriage, my family, my role as a father. You know nothing about what I've been through, what we've all been through." But Kimmel wasn't finished. The power he felt from having such a captive audience, from being able to destroy someone so publicly, seemed to intoxicate him. "I know that your kids are going to grow up seeing their father fall apart on national television. I know that they're going to watch this and understand why their parents couldn't make it work." The cruelty was breathtaking. Several audience members had gotten up and were walking toward the exits, unable to stomach any more of the psychological torture being broadcast live. The production crew looked mortified, many covering their eyes or turning away from their monitors. Affleck's composure finally shattered completely. Tears welled up in his eyes as years of pain, struggle, and public humiliation came pouring out. "How dare you? How dare you use my children as weapons against me? They are innocent in all of this. They don't deserve to have their father destroyed on television by someone who pretends to be his friend." "Friend?" Kimmel laughed coldly. "Friends don't enable each other's worst behaviors. Friends tell the truth, even when it hurts. And the truth is, Ben, you're a cautionary tale. You're what happens when Hollywood rewards mediocrity and excuses addiction." The verbal assault was relentless, each word designed to inflict maximum psychological damage. Affleck stumbled backward, his hand reaching for something to steady himself. The cameras captured every moment of his breakdown, broadcasting his raw vulnerability to millions of viewers who were watching in horror. "You want to know what a real friend would do?" Affleck's voice was thick with tears now. "A real friend would have called me privately if they had concerns. A real friend wouldn't ambush me on live television. A real friend wouldn't use my deepest pain as entertainment for your audience." The studio had become a war zone of emotions. Audience members were crying, shouting, some trying to comfort each other as they witnessed this brutal character assassination. The energy was toxic, poisonous, unlike anything that had ever been broadcast on late-night television. Kimmel seemed to feed off the chaos he had created. "Maybe this is exactly what you needed, Ben. Maybe someone needed to hold up a mirror and show you what you really are. Not the movie star, not the director, not the sympathetic addict. Just a broken man who can't take responsibility for his own failures." "Failures?" Affleck's voice rose to a shout. "You want to talk about failures? Let's talk about yours, Jimmy. Let's talk about how you failed as a human being tonight. how you've failed every standard of decency and professionalism. How you've failed your audience by turning entertainment into torture. The confrontation had reached a fever pitch. Both men were standing now, separated only by the desk that seemed increasingly inadequate as a barrier. The security team had moved in closer, ready to intervene if the verbal warfare turned physical. At least I haven't failed my family, Kimmel sneered, delivering what he clearly intended as a knockout blow. At least my wife didn't have to choose between me and her own sanity. The studio erupted. Audience members were screaming at Kimmel, some standing and pointing accusingly at the host. The sound was deafening, a mixture of boos, angry shouts, and people calling for the show to stop. It was pandemonium. Chaos broadcast live to a horrified nation. Affleck stood there, tears streaming down his face, his body shaking with rage and heartbreak. "You're sick," he said, his voice barely audible over the crowd noise. "You're a sick, twisted individual who gets pleasure from destroying people." The words cut through the chaos like a knife. For a moment even Kimmel seemed to falter, perhaps finally grasping the magnitude of what he had done. But it was too late. The damage was irreversible, broadcast live to millions of horrified viewers who were witnessing the complete destruction of a human being on national television. Affleck wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, trying to compose himself one final time. When he spoke again, his voice was steady but filled with a quiet dignity that made his words even more powerful. "I came here tonight to talk about my work, to share something I'm proud of with your audience. Instead, you've chosen to humiliate me, to attack my family, and to use my personal struggles as ammunition for your own twisted entertainment." The audience had largely turned against Kimmel now, their boos and angry shouts creating a wall of sound that seemed to physically push against the host. Many were holding up their phones, recording every moment of what they knew would become one of the most infamous moments in television history. "You think this makes you powerful, Jimmy?" Affleck continued, his voice gaining strength. "You think destroying someone on live television makes you important? All you've done is shown everyone who you really are beneath that fake smile and rehearsed jokes. You're a coward who hides behind his platform to hurt people who trusted you." Kimmel tried to regain control, his voice cracking slightly as he spoke. "Ben, you're being overly dramatic. This is just television. This is what we do here." "No," Affleck said firmly, stepping closer to the desk. "This isn't television. This is cruelty. This is what happens when someone mistakes having a platform for having character. You've betrayed not just me, but every guest who has ever sat in this chair trusting that they would be treated with basic human dignity." The studio audience erupted in applause, standing as one to support Affleck's words. The sound was thunderous, drowning out any attempt Kimmel might have made to respond. It was clear that the crowd had completely turned against the host, their anger palpable as they witnessed this public reckoning. "I'm done here," Affleck announced, his voice carrying clearly over the applause. "I won't be part of this sick spectacle anymore. You've gotten your entertainment at my expense, Jimmy. I hope it was worth destroying our friendship and your own reputation in the process." As Affleck began to walk away from the interview area, Kimmel made one last desperate attempt to maintain control. "Ben, wait! You can't just walk off the show. We're live on television." Affleck stopped and turned back, his eyes blazing with a mixture of hurt and determination. "Watch me." The simple words carried more weight than any dramatic speech could have. With that, Affleck pulled off his wireless microphone, dropped it on the floor, and began walking toward the studio exit. The audience rose to their feet in a standing ovation, their cheers following him as he made his way past the cameras and crew members who stood frozen in shock. Kimmel sat behind his desk, suddenly looking very small and very alone. The cheers, for Affleck continued, but underneath them was something else, a growing chorus of boos and angry voices directed at the host. Someone in the audience shouted, "You should be ashamed of yourself," and others quickly joined in with similar condemnations. The cameras caught every moment as Affleck reached the studio doors, paused for just a second to look back at the chaos he was leaving behind, and then disappeared into the hallway. The slam of the door echoed through the studio, a final punctuation mark on one of the most shocking moments in television history. In the aftermath, Kimmel tried desperately to regain his composure and continue the show, but the damage was done. The audience remained hostile, the atmosphere toxic beyond repair. Within minutes, clips of the confrontation were spreading across social media like wildfire, with overwhelming support for Affleck and condemnation for Kimmel's behavior. The incident became a cultural watershed moment, sparking conversations about the ethics of entertainment, the responsibility of hosts toward their guests, and the difference between comedy and cruelty. Kimmel's ratings plummeted in the weeks that followed. Advertisers pulled their support, and his reputation never fully recovered from the night he chose sadism over humanity. As for Affleck, his dignified exit and powerful words in the face of such brutal treatment only enhanced his standing with the public. The confrontation, while painful, ultimately revealed his strength of character and reminded everyone why grace under pressure is far more powerful than any weapon wielded by those who mistake cruelty for entertainment.